Hello and welcome back to Planet Nibiru, where anything is possible. Today we're going to talk about 4 awesome technologies that you aren't allowed to have. The inventors who died mysteriously after inventing these groundbreaking technologies that have been kept hidden from the public, and why these cases are proof positive to many folks that there are indeed conspiracies to suppress advanced technologies and keep them out of the hands of the general population. From curing cancer to free energy, these technologies were proven to work publicly before the inventors died suddenly and mysteriously. In many cases, the technologies, devices, and plants have disappeared under strange circumstances as well. So settle in as we take a ride on the wild side on Planet Nibiru. Firewater. Stanley Meyer created a water fuel cell and claimed that an automobile retrofitted with the device could use water as fuel instead of gasoline. The fuel cell split water into its component elements, hydrogen and oxygen. The hydrogen gas was burned to generate the energy. We commonly call these hydrogen cells today, but back in the 1980s and 1990s when Meyer was developing his version, they weren't so common. In fact, this process that reconstituted the water molecules was little known anywhere outside of scientific circles. Meyer was the first home inventor to popularize the technique. According to Stanley, his device required less energy to perform electrolysis than minimum energy requirements predicted or measured by conventional science. He demonstrated his dune buggy that ran on his system in a live news report on an Ohio TV station. After showing his buggy running on water, he said that it would take less than 11 gallons of water to drive from Los Angeles to New York using his technology. Stanley was quoted as saying that he declined $1 billion offer from an oil company to basically shelf his idea. He held patents on his invention and was ready for production when in 1996 he was sued by 2 of his investors to whom he had sold dealerships. In court, his device was examined by 3 experts who claimed that there was nothing revolutionary about the cell at all, and that it was simply using conventional electrolysis. Meyer did not deny this. However, the court found Stanley had committed gross and egregious fraud, and it ordered him to repay the 2 investors. 2 years later, in March of 1998, Stanley attended a meeting at a restaurant with 2 mysterious Belgian investors. At some point during the meal and the meeting, he ran out of the restaurant screaming, "They've poisoned me." And then he promptly fell over dead. No arrests were made, and the identities of the Belgian investors remains a mystery. A week later, his home was burglarized, leaving no trace of any of his experimental equipment, notes, or designs. Today, his patents have expired, his inventions are now in the public domain, available for all to use without restriction or royalty payment. Despite this fact, no major vehicle manufacturer has incorporated any of Stanley's work, or even looked seriously into the technology. Orgone. Acclaimed Austrian psychoanalyst named Wilhelm Reich was one of the most radical figures in the history of psychiatry. He developed a machine in which he attributed many strange and wonderful powers. After graduating in medicine from the University of Vienna in 1922, Reich became deputy director of Sigmund Freud's outpatient clinic, the Vienna Ambulatorium. If that alone wasn't enough to credit the man, he was also the author of several influential books, most notably Character Analysis, 1933, The Mass Psychology of Fascism, 1933, and Sexual Revolution, 1936. Reich was a respected figure in his field for many years. His work on character contributed to the development of Anna Freud's The Ego and the Mechanisms of Defense, 1936, and his idea of muscular armor, the expression of the personality in the way the body moves, shaped innovations such as body psychotherapy, gestalt therapy, bioenergetic analysis, and primal therapy. His writing influenced generations of intellectuals. He coined the phrase the sexual revolution, and according to one historian, acted as its midwife. During the 1968 student uprisings in Paris and Berlin, students scrawled his name on walls and threw copies of The Mass Psychology of Fascism at police. After discovering the roots of what he called orgone in Switzerland, He continued his studies and eventually moved to the United States to escape Hitler in World War II in Europe. Here, he developed his devices as well as perfected his theories on orgone and its roots and uses. He claimed that his device could produce rain by manipulating what he called organ energy, or universal life force, present in the atmosphere. The device consists of an array of parallel hollow metal tubes, which are connected at the rear to a series of flexible metal hoses, and open at the end of the hoses, which are placed in water. He claimed that pointing this device at a cloud would eventually cause the cloud to disperse, and that pointing it at an empty patch of sky would eventually cause a new cloud to form. He further claimed that it could also draw clouds in from great distances away. He once put the device to a test when blueberry farmers in Maine offered to pay him if he could end a drought that was threatening their crop. When the Weather Bureau had reportedly forecast no rain for several days, he began an experiment along with 3 assistants. He set up the device off the shore of Grand Lake near Bangor. At the site of the hydroelectric dam, he operated the device for just over an hour, and according to those present, the climate began changing. Later in the night, they found clouds were moving in, and in the morning, it started raining. Witnesses stated that the clouds were very eerie, and the rain continued throughout the day. However, scientists remained skeptical about this and claimed that it was all purely coincidence. Coincidence or not, the farmers found themselves completely satisfied and paid Reich his fee. Reich also claimed that the machine could be used to cure cancer, and that he had destroyed cancer cells using orgone, but no definitive proof of this could be found. He was in contact with and visited Albert Einstein regarding his invention. Though initially enthusiastic, Einstein later distanced himself from the man and the research. In the 1950s, Wilhelm Reich switched much of his attention to UFOs, which he believed were spraying radiation in an attempt to destroy Earth. He claimed to see hostile alien spaceships hovering menacingly close to his laboratory, and he and his son traveled in the deserted area of Arizona using the cloud-busting device. He claimed he was functioning as a space gun, aiming them at the sky in an attempt to drain the energy from the UFOs. By this time, he had attracted the attention of authorities in the area and was arrested. For reasons unknown, he received a 2-year prison sentence, and the psychiatrist at the federal prison reported that he was experiencing delusions. 8 months later, he passed away in his cell after suffering from a heart attack just a few days before he was due to be released on parole. Again, seemingly without reason, the court then ordered all of the blueprints and his devices to be burned, and they destroyed all of his publications. A royal cure. American inventor Royal Raymond Rife invented a device that emitted audio frequencies and was capable of sending those frequencies into a person's body. The frequencies would destroy microorganisms found to be associated with cancer. Rife's work was totally unlike any other work done in pursuit of a cure for cancer. He was literally alone in his field of research. But that was not to say that he or his work couldn't be verified. In the 1930s, he made several optical compound microscopes, and using a movie camera took time-lapse microscopy movies of microbes. He also built microscopes that included polarizers. One of his microscopes was found to be 8 times more powerful than any other microscopes that were available on the market. All of his contemporaries were using regular available microscopes, so he actually had an unprecedented access to biological material that most other scientists couldn't even see. Rife and his supporters claimed that each disease or condition of the body had its own electromagnetic frequency. They also said that finding that frequency and producing an impulse of the same frequency will kill or disable those diseased cells. His device, which he called a beam ray, would do just that. He first experimented with the device by infecting lab animals and with various diseases and then curing them. Word of his work and inventions had spread to a point that various groups of doctors and researchers were quite interested. However, the AMA, or American Medical Association, had refused to even look at his research and had offhandedly dismissed it. But certain doctors and researchers would not be deterred, and later he was presented with 16 terminal cancer victims afflicted with a variety of malignancies, all of which he treated for a period of 70 days. At that point, 14 of them were declared to be cured by the group of physicians. The remaining 2 patients were treated for an additional 20 days when they were also declared to be disease-free. The treatments included short breaks with nutrients to promote lymphatic elimination of the destroyed microbes. In 1940, Dr. Arthur W. Yale announced that RIFE had discovered a technique for curing cancer, so unique and amazing that medicine was on the verge of completely eliminating the second highest cause of death in North America. Needless to say, this began an all-out assault on RIFE's claims. They could not be independently replicated by a special counsel and were therefore discredited by independent researchers who said they had tried to replicate his work and failed. After the initial attention to the findings, he could no longer find financial backers, and his work was all but stopped. RIFE blamed the scientific rejection of his claims on a grand conspiracy involving big, powerful organizations which had brainwashed and intimidated other scientists. RIFE's devices are currently classified as a subset of radionics devices, which are generally viewed as pseudomedicine by mainstream experts. Like so many alternative cancer cures, RIFE's machines were discredited by industry elites, and as a result, his machines were never put in widespread use by mainstream medicine, leaving us to wonder what could have been. So many lives that have been lost, and we are all touched by cancer in some way. Smaller is sometimes much bigger. In the late 1990s, a Dutch electronics technician and TV repairman named Jan SLOOT announced the development of the SLOOT digital coding system, a revolutionary advance in data transmission, and he claimed could reduce a feature-length movie down to a file size of just 8 kilobytes. This would mean you could download the latest Avenger movie in less than a second. 8 kilobytes is about the size of the average paragraph of text, or the average email. It's like a really long text from a friend. It might be long and boring to read, but in terms of data size, it's a blip on the screen. The average feature film in today's compression is at least 10,000 times larger for a low-resolution copy and 175,000 times larger for a high-res copy. So the technology to compress a full-length film to 8 kilobytes in 1999 was akin to magic, or even something better. It would have been basically priceless, because back then high-speed data access was nothing like it is today. So it would have been even more important then. SLOOT claimed that his method was quite different from the conventional methods used by modern technology. Dutch visionary and former CEO of Philips, who was also an investor in the technology and who joined with SLOOT to bring the technology to the world, described it in this way. It's not about compression, really. Everyone is mistaken about that principle. It can be compared to the concept such as Adobe PostScript, where the sender and receiver both know what kind of data recipes can be transferred without the data itself having to be sent. SLOOT later demonstrated his invention to a number of Philips executives, where he used an old PC and played movies simultaneously from a kilobyte chip at high speed without reading from a hard drive. Strangely, after getting a bunch of investors and forming a deal to sell the technology, Jan experienced a heart attack the day before he could sell his patent and invention, and his device was never recovered. He was found in his garden, and although his family consented to an autopsy, one was never performed. The key component to the technology remains missing to this day. So what do you guys think about these stories? I have my own opinions, and I'd love to hear what everyone else's thoughts are on it. Get in the comment box and let us know what you believe and why. We thank you all for watching, and we hope you enjoyed the video as much as we enjoyed making it. Thank you so much for all your likes, subscribes, and comments, and we'll see you guys in the next video.